Welcome to Cooking for Moderately Lazy People, the series where we attempt to make a decent dinner without too much effort. This is the second installment in this series, and based off the feedback from the first installment, I've crammed every light I can fit into this kitchen. Hopefully that will help with the lighting situation. The recipe we'll be making today is citrus roast chicken. This is not a difficult recipe from an effort standpoint, but it is time consuming. This is not something you can just throw together on a whim. That being said, let's gather our ingredients. The first thing we'll need is obviously a chicken. I use a young chicken for this. You can use a larger chicken or even a larger bird, but it would require more citrus fruit. You could do this with a turkey if you wanted to, but all of the times and ingredients would need to be increased accordingly. So this recipe can scale up, but it may require some experimentation to get the values correct. Next, we'll need a salt grinder and a pepper grinder. We're also going to need 1 whole orange, 2 whole lemons, and 3 whole limes. Then we'll grab 3 whole cloves of garlic. We'll peel them, but won't crush them or mince them. We're actually going to use them intact. We're also going to need a 32-ounce box of chicken broth and the components for a basting mixture. For that, we'll need 3/4 of a teaspoon each of garlic powder, oregano, and sage, as well as 2 tablespoons of olive oil. We're also going to grab some uncooked rice. This really depends on how many people you're going to be feeding, but typically this would be between 1 to 2 cups. Also, grab enough butcher's twine to tie the bird's legs shut. We're going to start by dealing with our citrus fruit. We're going to wind up with 2 groups of fruit, which I'm just going to call Group 1 and Group 2. First, we'll cut the orange in half. One half goes in Group 1, the other half goes in Group 2. We're then going to cut the 2 lemons in half. One half of 1 lemon goes to Group 1 and 2 halves go to Group 2. This leaves us with half a lemon we won't wind up using. We can put that in a Ziploc bag and toss it back in the refrigerator. Finally, we're going to cut all 3 limes in half. 2 halves go in Group 1, and the remaining 4 halves go in Group 2. I don't know why the camera chose to autofocus here periodically. That's something I'll look to clean up in future episodes. We're going to set Group 2 aside, and then zest the fruit in Group 1. I'm going to speed up the video here because several minutes of me zesting fruit isn't going to be the best viewing experience. But while I'm zesting at superhuman speed, let's talk about cost. Keep in mind, the costs are local to my area, so your mileage may vary. Young chicken in my area usually costs between $8 to $9 depending on weight. I often try to catch it when it's on sale for cheaper, but I'm going to give the regular price since sometimes you might just want a bird now and not wait to save a couple of bucks. The cost of rice will probably cap out around a $1/2 depending on the type and the quantity that you use. The fruit usually runs about $1 for the orange, $1 total for the limes, and about $1.25 for the lemons. The broth, assuming we use a store brand for this, runs about $1.50. The garlic cloves come in at about 10 cents max, and the garlic powder, sage, oregano, and butcher's twine are effectively negligible cost. Let's assume the worst case here and take the max value for everything. The meal still clocks in at under $15. It's not super cheap, but for a family of 4, that's still less than $4 per person. Once we have all the fruit in Group 1 zested, we're going to set the fruit itself back aside. Now, let's take the chicken out of the refrigerator and remove it from the packaging. We'll then place it into a roasting pan backside up. We'll then grab some paper towels and pat the backside of the bird as dry as we can get it. Next, we'll take the salt and pepper grinders and season the bird to taste. We'll then take half our mixed zest and pat it into the bird's skin. This will also pat the salt and pepper in place in the process. Now, I know some people don't like zest on the outside of the bird because it will eventually burn. I don't mind it for this recipe because I think the flavor that it imparts is well worth it, and some of it will run off anyway when we start basting the bird after the 1 hour mark. Now that we've seasoned one side of the bird, we'll flip the bird, in a non-rude way, and repeat the same process on the other side. First patting it down with a paper towel, then salt and peppering, then pressing the zest in. Before I set this bird aside to move on to the next step, I will go ahead and fish any innards out of the bird if necessary. You can really do this at any point in the process prior to stuffing the bird, but I chose to do it at this specific point because I forgot to do it before now. Now the outside of our bird is seasoned, it's time to deal with the inside of our bird. And for that, we're going to deal with the fruit in Group 2. We're going to take the orange half in group 2 and cut it into 8 total wedges. We're then going to take each half lemon in group 2 and cut it into 4 wedges apiece, resulting in 8 total. We're then going to cut each of the limes into 4 wedges each, resulting in 8 total lime wedges. Now, at this point, we're going to go ahead and start the oven and set it to 400 degrees to begin preheating. Now that we have 8 wedges each of all 3 of our fruits and our 3 whole garlic cloves, it's time to start stuffing this bird. We're going to take our fruit and garlic and start shoving them, in the words of the modern Canadian philosopher Wade Wilson, right up Main Street. We're going to stuff these things inside the bird until we run out of fruit and garlic, or until we run out of room inside the bird, whichever comes first. All the fruit might not fit, but you want to try to get as much of it in there as possible. I'll even start shoving them down the neck hole if I've filled the body cavity up enough. The more fruit you get inside the bird, the more fruit flavor it will impart to the bird, the more moist the bird will be, and the more runoff will leak down into the broth at the bottom of the roasting pan. This might become important later. Once we're done stuffing this bird until no new fruit or garlic will fit, we'll tie the legs off with butcher's twine. We don't want the fruit falling out during the roasting process. We'll now add enough chicken broth to the bottom of the roasting pan to cover the bottom. We don't want too little because we want liquid to help keep the chicken moisturized, but we don't want too much because it will affect our fruit juice to salty bird water ratio for later. Now we put the bird in the oven. We're going to roast it for an hour before we move on to the next phase, but we're going to set the timer for 20 minutes. The reason is we want to check the roasting pan every 20 minutes to make sure we have enough salty, fruity bird water at the bottom. We'll repeat these 20-minute intervals until the 60-minute mark. Well, now that we've got 20 minutes to kill, what should we do? Remember the basting mixture I mentioned earlier? And the fruit in group 1 that we zested and set aside? And those other ingredients, other than the rice that we got out? Well, now it's time to combine them all into our basting mixture. First, we're going to take the zested fruit from group 1 and juice it. And once we finish juicing, in a totally non-performance enhancing drug kind of way, we'll dump in the olive oil, sage, oregano, and garlic powder into the fruit juice. We'll mix it with a whisk, but it will resettle. Before we start basting, we'll need to whisk it again each time. Now we'll set the basting mixture aside and put the rice into the sieve. We're going to wash the excess starch off it. Once that's done, we're going to set the rice in a rice cooker with no liquid. We're not going to start it at this point, obviously, but let's leave it there for later. We're also going to rinse the sieve again because it's pulling double duty. Now, there's going to be a lot of editing from this point on because me standing next to an oven in 20-minute chunks won't make for the best viewing experience, even if I do a little dance number. We're going to skip to the 20-minute mark and briefly watch me try to add broth to the roasting pan without fully removing it from the oven. Be careful here, because there are lots of warm things you don't want to touch. Also, you're almost guaranteed to get a face full of steam doing this. While we're watching me try not to scald myself on hot metal, let's briefly talk sides. We're going to have the rice as the first side, so I'd recommend a non-starchy side, such as green beans or steamed vegetables for the second. Now that we've gotten that done, we're going to skip the 40-minute mark entirely and head straight to the 59-minute mark. We're going to the 59-minute mark rather than 60 minutes because we need to whisk our basting mixture. We'll remove the roasting pan from the oven and give our bird a good once-over with the baste. We're also going to double-check our salty, fruity bird water to make sure we still have enough. We're then going to stick our bird back in the oven and then repeat the basting process every 15 minutes. We're going to do the basting ritual 3 more times, once at 75, 90, and 105 minutes. At the 2-hour mark, our bird should be ready to come out of the oven for good. So let's skip ahead to the 2-hour mark for this bird. We're now going to pull it out of the oven for the final time. We're going to transfer it onto a serving tray and allow it to rest. While it's resting, we're going to retrieve that sieve from earlier. I've made several references to the fruity, salty bird water in the bottom of the pan, and here's where it's going to have its big moment. We're going to set the sieve in a Pyrex bowl, and as safely as possible, we're going to pour the birdy, salty fruit water through the sieve into the bowl. That should get out all the solid bits we don't want. We don't have to empty the roasting pan, we just need to make sure we have enough that we can fill our rice cooker up to the fill line. That's the secret of this recipe. This isn't as much a citrus roast chicken recipe as it's a citrus roast salty fruity bird water rice recipe with a side of chicken. We're going to fill the rice cooker up to the appropriate fill line for however much rice we dumped into it, and then we're going to plug it in and start it up. If you don't have a rice cooker, you can do this with minute rice on your stove. I'm going to use my Pyrex measuring cup for this because the fruit juice runoff and broth will be extremely hot. As always, be very careful while doing this. While the rice is cooking, we're going to grab whatever long, pokey, or grabby things we have and start removing the fruit and garlic from inside our bird. This just makes it easier to carve. I would not recommend eating the fruit that spent the last 2 hours inside the bird. I saw someone try that once, and that person nearly spat the fruit out. I also wouldn't recommend eating the garlic cloves, but I've yet to find any scenario where I'd recommend eating a whole clove of garlic. Once the rice is done, we'll remove it from the rice cooker and put it in a bowl for serving. We'll most likely lose some due to getting scorched in the rice cooker, but it will be worth it to get our fruity, salty birdwater rice. We'll then carve our chicken, but since this video isn't Intro to Chicken Carving 101, I'm just skipping to the finished products. And there we have it, citrus roast chicken with citrus rice. The fruity, juicy bird that's well worth the wait without too much work. As with all the videos in this series, the recipe will be listed in the description. And remember, if you liked the video or the recipe, please feel free to like, subscribe, comment on, or share the video. And thanks for watching.